thank you both. I didn't even introduce you at the beginning.
No,
everyone.
rude.
Yeah,
I'm Jay.
Hi there, my name is Bruce, and this is episode 12 of Startup Disky's Full Tech Chat. And today we're going to be asking the question, has technology made our lives better? Yes, it has. That's the end of the show. Bye-bye. So I think probably the main thing we're going to be doing in this is we're going to be having possibly a few, I don't know, philosophical discussions about some of the changes that have happened in our lives with technology. But I can certainly, from my perspective, talk about, say, the way things were when I grew up. So, for example...
My God, hand crank radio?
So I do actually have quite vivid memories of the very first games console that we received, which was, I can't even remember the name of the brand or whatever. It was a hand-me-down from my uncle. And when we plugged that into our big old CRT television set, we had the ability to play tennis, squash, I think there might have been soccer and maybe one other game, and they all looked the same. And they all involved two little paddles with a little bouncing ball going boing, boing, boing. And it was just the orientation of
the screen would go this way or that way.
That's right. And that was a, sort of the very first, computer game console that we ever had. And then, of course, if we look at technology in that area today and you look at sort of the 3D graphics, the sort of immersive 3D graphics and that sort of stuff, it has definitely come a long way. But is it better? Well, that'll be the question we'll be asking. How about you, Dana? Do you have any sort of any thoughts about some of the technologies that you've really seen change a lot in your lifetime?
Yeah, well, it depends on the technology as to whether it's better or not. But I think on average, well, much more than average, things have vastly improved as far as computing, as far as medicine, as far as automotive, communications, pretty much everything. That's the nature of progress. But
probably policing as well, solving crimes and stuff with forensics.
Yeah, forensics, yep. That sort of thing. DNA testing and general crime solving, I suppose. Yeah, it's generally better. Yep. But there are outliers.
Yes,
I'm sure we'll get into those.
We'll definitely discuss those. How about you, Jay? Do you have any sort of standouts that you want to mention?
I was just trying to think back about technology that was around when I grew up. Now, granted, it's not that long ago. And I was thinking about, cassette tapes, going to CD, going to mini disc, and then eventually the MP3 players. And it reminded me of a debate I heard my dad have once with my brother, who swears that the old vinyl records sound better than even the best digital anything. And of course, my dad's completely disagreeing with that. And I don't know where I was going with that, but that's two people that will never agree that technology improved music, which I think it did.
I mean, I think the audiophiles out there will always say that the analog sound is better, and one of the reasons for that is there's never any. Think of it from this perspective. If you're taking a photograph with an old film camera versus a photograph with a digital camera. With a digital camera, it's with the digital camera, it's all about. I can't get it to work. Okay.
There it is.
Yeah, I obviously don't have them switched. Oh, there we go. With a film camera, compared to a digital camera, with a digital camera, it's all about the pixels. And to some extent, digital audio is the same way. When you have an analog recording compared to a digital recording, it has a lot to do with, how much data, how much digital data is there for the audio recording. But I know people that just basically swear by albums and they much prefer to listen to that. I am not that much of a snob. I like convenience with music. I don't want to listen to stuff like the old MP3s we used to listen to when we would download them off like Napster and stuff like that, where you get this awful tinny crackly sound because you had an MP3 that had been recorded at like 80 kilobytes or something like that. And so in that regard, it needs to be of a certain quality, but I definitely don't consider myself someone that says, oh man, this CD sounds like shit compared to this album. I just don't. I don't.
Yeah. I will say though, I think sometime last year I started loading all my audio in FLAC format, FLAC. I don't know what it stands for. And I went from 5 megabyte files to 30, 40, 50 megabyte files. And holy crap, can I hear the difference? And that's just on my stupid little computer speakers. Quite amazing. So
when I was growing up, well, I guess I'm talking about a difference between then and now. You would go into a record shop, a specific record shop, which of course was originally album, then it went into CDs, and there would just be this huge range of music there. There would sometimes be specialist music stores. And then you would have your bigger stores that sold music as well as other things. And like, for instance, we have a chain out here called JB Hi-Fi, and they sell TVs and stereos and all that sort of stuff. And there was a time when they would have a huge section of music, and that section is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller as, of course, we move on to these different services, things like streaming services, or, if you're just buying the music off, sort of iTunes or whatever, if you're paying for the song. And so there is then no need to go out and buy a physical package. And while I can definitely see the logic in that, I mean, when you're buying a package and all it contains on it is digital data, why do you need a plastic package? Why do you need a disc? Why do you need notes and stuff on there? But at the same time, there was a very different feeling for me as someone growing up when I would buy a physical album, when you would have it there. Okay, I know it's a bunch of digital data that could just be downloaded, but there was a definite feeling of, I don't know, sort of a very different feeling came from owning an album compared to just downloading it off the internet.
And let's be honest, it looked cool. As your collection grew, you had this shelf full of albums. You could just walk up, pull one off the shelf, put it in a CD player, crank the amp, and it's kind of like a ritual. When you really wanted to listen to music, there was a little bit of a ritual involved, and I kind of missed that when I have a terabyte of music. I don't listen to half of it or more. I don't even know what I have anymore, and it's not a pretty shelf full of discs and cases and collector's editions or whatever. Same with DVDs and movies. Used to be a cool collection. Now it's all just on Plex.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that does concern me about the whole concept of a streaming service over owning something, and that is the fact that what is on the streaming service is never guaranteed to stay.
You can take it away at any time.
Yeah, that's right. They could just suddenly decide they're going to remove it. You could have an artist that gets cancelled because they've said something horrendous or something like that, or there could be a song that maybe has something offensive in it, and attitudes change throughout time, and all of a sudden, things either getting changed, edited, censored, removed, something like that. And these are things that we are seeing happen today, and those things are the things that really worries me about a streaming service as such.
There have been all kinds of reasons, like people getting canceled, political reasons. There have been certain TV shows that covered a topic 30 years ago when it was fine, and now suddenly it's not. And those episodes they weren't removed completely, but they cut pieces out. And I'm like, well, I used to watch that show. I liked that show when I was a kid. I will go out and find it myself and have it on my own server so that nobody can mess with it.
Yeah.
It to me, it is, it's a ridiculous thing to actually decide that because of an attitude of a particular time that we should pretend that it never happened. Because that's a very, very dangerous way to sort of approach kind of history and stuff like that, because you're trying to pretend like that's something that didn't happen, and it did happen. And while you don't necessarily want to promote those attitudes anymore, you might look at it and say, that's really freaking offensive. I mean, I can give you some examples of stuff from Australian history where I go back and I watch and I think, oh, that is so cringe. That is, I am so embarrassed that something like that ended up on air or something like that. But I don't believe that that should be erased from the archives. I don't believe that should ever just be destroyed. It is a part of history. It might be a very embarrassing part of history, but it's still a part of history. And that is something that I do find very worrying about streaming. So while I can totally say streaming is very, very convenient. I mean, we have a situation like, you know, my wife and I were driving in a car somewhere. We're going for a drive to wherever. We just start talking about music. Whatever, you know, just have some sort of discussion. Oh, you know, it's like that song, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that song. You've never heard that song before. Okay, I'll look it up. And so I'll be driving away. She'll just grab her phone. She'll look up the name of a song, grab it from the streaming services and start playing it. And we could just play it there while we're driving in the car, you know, and I haven't had to go to a shop to buy an album or a single or something like that. We've just been able to grab that, you know, song straight off a streaming server and listen to it as we're driving in the car within the context of the conversation. And that is something where I look and think, that's awesome. That's a great time to be alive, to be able to do something like that. But then, as I say, I definitely see this flip side with streaming services that, you know, they can just remove stuff as they see fit. Whereas if I own it, if I've bought it and I've got it sitting on a server or sitting on on a piece of plastic at a shelf, no one can take it away from me.
Well, that's what people, a lot of people make that mistake. They think I pay for the streaming service, therefore whatever you have is now mine. I paid for it, so I should have access to it.
You paid for access to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of
for
payments,
access to a library that can be changed without any input from you.
Yeah. And how many, I don't even know. I would have to look it up, but how many streaming services do we have now? Like on average, what do people pay a month for all their streaming?
Are you talking just music or are you talking TV and
everything? Streaming everything.
Everybody
Sport,
has a streaming
music,
service now.
Video. Like that's the downside of streaming services. Whatever the content may be, everybody is charging something, and you end up paying more than what you would with a regular cable TV subscription.
There's definitely an air of greed going on with streaming services at the moment, where someone sort of said, you know, oh wow, look at how much money Netflix is making. We need to make our own, that sort of thing. And so you have all these companies sinking all this money into these streaming services. They've got to produce their own original content, but you end up with a market saturation that you can assume that everyone's going to, oh, okay, we'll add our streaming service and they'll buy ours, and maybe they will. Or maybe they won't, or maybe they'll buy yours and they'll drop someone else's. The idea that everyone is going to go out and pay a subscription for every single one of these services is just silly. In particular, when you look at the, you know, sort of the economic climate, people wanting to save money, you know, people are going to just trim it down to probably 2 or 3, let's say. Some people probably even less, but let's just say in a standard household, I could be wrong with this, but they'll probably be looking at maybe 2 or 3 streaming services. And so as these companies just keep bringing out more and more, they're just shooting themselves in the foot. I think they are overestimating how many of these streaming services most people are willing to pay for.
Yeah, and most of the smaller ones don't turn much of a profit, if any at all.
I've heard that the Apple ones don't make any money. I've heard that Apple are just sinking huge amounts of money into Apple
Disney.
TV Plus. Yeah.
Disney is sinking millions and millions and millions of dollars into the Disney Plus, and it's not turning a profit. And in fact, they've lost a lot of subscribers recently, myself included.
Because they're producing shit?
That, and it's just too expensive. They raised the price 3 times since I first signed up for it, and they're still not making money, but they're cooking their books to make it look like they are. So that's going to turn around and bite them eventually.
How can you not make money with a hit like Snow White? I don't get it.
Well, they, there's out here we have a much smaller population, and so that issue with there being too many streaming services becomes an even bigger issue because we've got a much smaller population. So, over here initially there were only a couple. There was sort of Netflix and Amazon Prime. They were the two biggies, and then sort of then added a couple of others. And around about that area, I think you were probably looking at a situation where they could make some money, but then they just started adding more and more. And what actually happened was some of the streaming services over here that were showing certain shows, all of a sudden the maker of those shows decides to make their own streaming service. Yeah. So they start their own streaming service and then they take away shows from the other one. So, and that, that to me is where things really start to fall down.
Netflix used to have a lot of the Marvel properties. You had Daredevil, you had Jessica Jones, you had Defenders, you had Iron Fist, and then Disney's like, hey, we're going to make our own streaming service. We'll take care of this from now on. And those shows went bye-bye.
Yeah. And there's ads. I think
ads is about the only way they can make any money at all.
Prime Video, you paid for Prime, so you got free access to the video, and it was ad-free. By now, I think every paid streaming service, you still get ads, unless you pay even more.
I think there was a massive backlash to that, to one of them doing that, and they ended up having to stop it or something. I could be wrong, but I vaguely remember reading somewhere, and I probably need to check that out, but I vaguely remember hearing that one of the streaming services then started putting ads in it, and they copped such a backlash for it, they actually stopped doing it.
Didn't YouTube start doing that as well? Like, even if you, as the creator, said no ads, they would still inject ads at certain things?
Yeah. They were doing that, which, because that's the choice you can make as a YouTube content creator. You can say, no, I would like people to watch my stuff without ads. I'm not here to make money. It's about the viewing experience for me. Yeah. And so they would then and then they were still finding ads in there. And of course, that's a real freaking insult, because it means that the person who's actually creating the content's not getting any money, because they've opted to not have ads, but then YouTube have decided to play ads anyway.
And then he's still telling all of his viewers, hey, I don't put ads in my videos, and the viewers are like, yeah, you do.
Yeah. By the way, I asked AI, which is something I want to talk about later, and it said on average, people in the US pay for about 4 streaming services. The cost of these subscriptions average around $61 to $70 a month.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. And then you have the people that just get their stuff from torrents that laugh at people like us that pay for it every month. And
there is there's the way I've often looked at this sort of stuff is when you start to see the torrents, the downloads and stuff increasing, it's usually because of mistakes being made with the providers. So when they're making things too expensive or too difficult to get hold of, that's when you start to see this torrent stuff going up. And I sort of feel like they need to take note of the stuff, because I am someone who would rather pay for things. I prefer to pay for things. And so, but if you make it so that I can't pay for something, what are my options? You know what I mean? And so I find it gets, they really do need to take a good hard look at themselves. It's like if there's a movie that comes out and people choose not to see it on the cinema, but they end up waiting for the torrents to come out. It's probably because the film's shit. I mean, if it's a really good film, people will wait to go to the cinema to watch it. People will actually queue up. They'll go buy a ticket. They'll go and see it. But when, you see these movies that are just so crappy these days, the majority of them, people are like,
Well, to be fair, even good movies, I will not go to the cinema or movie theater, whatever you want to call it.
Though.
Yeah. I'm not odd. I just don't want people talking over the movie and chewing popcorn in my ear and having their bright-ass cell phone screens in my face.
Well, go see Snow White. You won't have to worry about it.
Huh?
Go see Snow White. You won't have to worry about all that.
Yeah,
I'll be under the seat. I won't see anything.
But anyhow, I feel like in terms of it, has the technology it made our lives better. I think this one we can definitely say that there are huge advantages in things like streaming services over actually having to go and buy things physically. There's an incredible level of convenience, but it sounds to me like we have rather a lot to say about streaming providers. That might be one for another show.
Yeah, I prefer to own physical copies of, because I don't care how good the streaming service is. It does not match the visual quality of watching a Blu-ray DVD on your high-res, your HD television at home.
Yeah, and providers have been busted on that many times. If you pull up certain metrics while you're watching something at 1080 or 4K, it turns out you're watching an upscaled 720p video. They do that all the time.
Yep.
And it has nothing to do with your connection speed or anything. It has to do with their server load. But that's not what you're paying for. You want 4K, you should get 4K, not this pixelated mess you're getting.
I've only got a 1080p TV, so I can only judge on 1080p. But I can say that on the whole, I have never really had issues with video quality. I think there was one time where I might have been watching some sort of sporting event there was a streaming sporting event that had huge demand. I can't even remember what it was, and apparently there were problems with the video then during that. But on the whole, any of the movies or TV that I watch on streaming services, I rate the quality pretty highly. So, I don't know.
The country has 5 people in it. I mean, what are they going to mess up?
So that's I mean,
streaming service, yay or nay?
I'd say.
Mostly,
I'm going to say mostly yay.
Mostly yay.
I'm going to see if I can. Is it going to? Will I get one? There it goes.
Hey.
Yeah.
My computer has never done this before, so I was very surprised to see that pop up.
Now, I'm going to probably bring up one that's going to be a big one here, but we'll just have to try and we'll make sure we don't get too carried away with it. And of course, it is something that can be broken into several categories. But what I'm going to say now, the overarching one is social media.
Yeah.
Now, what would you consider is the start of social media? When did social media start?
Ooh.
I mean, for me, granted, I was in Europe. For me, it was probably MySpace. We had other ones called CU2, but I think those were just European. I think MySpace was the big one.
Would you go as far back as old-fashioned dial-up bulletin board systems, or is that not qualify as social media?
No, because those are closed. They're not accessible by just anyone.
You have to register.
But they're certainly a precursor. They're certainly like the grandfather of social media, but they're not actual, like, you can't compare it today to today's social media. But it was a way to communicate with other people online.
I mean, do we count MSN Messenger and stuff like that as?
See, I was just wondering that. Do you count like AOL? Because AOL was early 90s, and it was accessible by pretty much anyone. But it wasn't like you didn't have your own page. You didn't have stuff that you shared with other people. It was all like online content and then chat rooms and things like that.
Yeah.
So
I think ICQ had a way to search up people. Like you could search outside of your friends and find new people, but
ICQ, AOL Instant Messenger, MSN Messenger, all those were another precursor too. But I think MySpace was probably the first social media thing where you had your own space, your own spot where you can post whatever you want, share whatever you want. And anybody else could see it, or at least people on your friends list could see it.
My God, if I think back about the tacky HTML stuff he used to do on those pages, horrifying. Oh.
I have to admit, I did see some other people's MySpace pages. I never had my own MySpace page. I never really got into MySpace. I was interested in, say, some musicians, and that sometimes they would put you towards a MySpace page, and so I would see other people's. But it was not. I mean, for me, probably the first exposure to social media on any sort of scale probably would have been Facebook, I would say. And I think obviously that's probably the big one that really started a lot of things around the world. I mean, just given the number of people that ended up subscribing to it.
Facebook started out as just something on a college campus. It was only people on that campus that could access it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then they went public and everybody was like, oh, let's do this. Because it was like MySpace, but it didn't have all the garbage on it that MySpace had at the time.
Well, to be fair, Facebook in the beginning was fun because people were sharing actual real things. It wasn't like, ooh, I'm having a strawberry, let's take a picture of it. No, because back then taking a picture and uploading it was actually a headache, and you didn't have a cell phone with a capable camera, so you didn't do all that stuff. It was just people sharing normal things. It wasn't like, oh, I'm at a restaurant.
Well, this is actually one of the things that I think is one of the real problems with social media in general. Is number one is people creating a perception of what their life is on Facebook. So they're not going to post any photos of any shitty stuff that happens to them. I mean, unless, some people might post if they've had a car accident or something like that. But people aren't, they don't post, my boss was really horrible to me today or something like that. They post when they're on the beach and take a photo of their feet in the sand and crap like that, where, and it creates this idea, creating an illusion of what your life is about and potentially trying to outdo other people. I can give an example. Names will be changed to protect the innocent, but I knew of a couple who were going through a really rough time, very, very, unpleasant things going on in their relationship. But if you were to have a look at Facebook, they were living the time of their lives. Oh, yeah. Daily posts about all of the wonderful things, all these great things happening. Now, is there anything wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with someone putting a brave face on a difficult situation? No, there isn't. But at the same time, there's a kind of a deception going on there. I
do think it's wrong. I mean, if you put on a brave face when you go to the supermarket or you meet your neighbor, but if you purposefully broadcast it to everybody online, then you're just
I'm
not
disingenuous. It's dishonest.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying people need to post videos of arguments with their significant other or anything like that. But it is, it's sort of this idea that everything in life is perfect, or let me put it another way: have a look at this wonderful life that I'm living. That sort of thing, which I tend to get pretty annoyed with when I see some of those sorts of posts, where I sort of feel like people are really just trying to say, look how good I have it. Yeah. I mean, I've got no complaints about my life. I'm fine, but I don't feel a need to post every bloody good thing that happens to me.
I mean, I got the perfect life. I'm not sitting here recording a podcast, and my cat did not just throw up on my HDMI cable on the floor. Not at all. Didn't happen. My life's perfect.
Did she really?
Yes.
Oh, Lord. That's why my door is locked. they're out in the living room.
But I will say that it shifted a lot. I don't know exactly when, but people take pride now in complaining and being a victim. Everything is a complaint. Everything is some kind of victimhood. And that's even worse. I'd rather see you make believe that you have the perfect life than you bitching and moaning about everything.
Yeah, I mean, when I, in the early days of Facebook, or in the early days of my use of Facebook, obviously it had been going for a few years by then, one of the things that was appealing about it was the kind of reconnection. So that idea of all of a sudden you get in touch with someone that you used to go to school with, and you find they're all friends with other people you used to go to school with. And next thing you know, you've connected with all these people you haven't seen in 20 years or whatever. Yeah. And hey, how you going? Oh man, yeah, we used to be friends, all this sort of stuff. And that was a very, very appealing thing, that you would have all these people, you'd have all these lost connections that you would reestablish. And that was a really nice thing about it.
There is that period when you first set up your account and then you're like, oh, I found this person. Oh, I found that person. And then Facebook pops up and says, hey, upload your contact list and we'll help you find these people. And you're like, okay. And then today, and when Facebook asks you that, you're like, hell no.
Yeah,
I'm giving you access to nothing.
Do you remember when there was a time, it's been a while, I don't know if it's still a thing, where people actively showed off how many friends they had? Like it was a status symbol. Yeah. People that you didn't even know, you were just going around friending as many people as possible.
Yeah. And also, do you remember that whole situation? No, I don't want to look at their profile because they'll know I've looked at it. I don't want them to know that I've looked at their profile.
Yeah.
Or will this person know? Will they get a notification if I unfriend them?
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff.
And similarly, I've had arguments with people that they tried to friend request me, and I said, no, we weren't friends in school. I hated you, actually. I didn't like you. I thought you walked off a bridge. And then they friend you online, and you say, nah, and they get all pissy about it. They get offended. Like, why?
I had the bizarre situation with someone that I used to go to school with, who I was friends with this guy, and he friended me on Facebook. Friend request. Okay, yeah, no worries. Add friend. Cool. I did that. I don't know. 24 hours goes by, something like that. I then get a message going, "Are you one of these people that makes friends with people on Facebook and then don't say anything?" And I'm like, "You added me, dude. I figured you had something to say."
Yeah.
So yeah, unfriend.
Bye-bye.
There are a couple of things that I feel that Facebook has shown me, and this isn't for everyone. This isn't for everyone that I've made friends with on Facebook or anything like that. But number one, sometimes you come to the realization that you lost contact with someone for a reason. And when you you establish contact with this person again, and they're like, "Hey, man, haven't seen you in ages." Oh, man, blah blah blah. And you think, "Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, I wonder why I lost contact with this person." And then a few weeks later, you're kind of like, "Yeah, I remember now. I remember why we didn't stay in contact." and I felt like that was sort of an interesting reminder, I guess, of sometimes there's a reason why
I started giving disclaimers. This was years ago. I started giving disclaimers if someone said, "Hey, do you have Facebook?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." Before you send a request or whatever, here's a disclaimer. And I have this list of stuff, like I post wildly offensive stuff. I troll. I piss people off on purpose. And I have this whole list of disclaimers. And so if you think that's going to bug you, let's just be friends in real life. No need to be on Facebook. And a few people have indeed opted to not friend request me based on my disclaimers. And we still get along daily in real life just fine. But they have no idea the kind of shit I post.
I had someone add me as a friend once. And this was someone who I'd had a friendly professional connection with. So someone whose services I had engaged for something. And during the time where they were providing those services, we'd ended up with a bit of a bond. Okay, so I'm not saying friends, but we sort of had enough in common that we would be able to just chat about stuff and all that. So anyhow, one day I get a friend request from this person. No worries, and I accept it. Now, I don't know, maybe a week later, a couple of weeks later, I posted this comment, and it was a joke. It was always a joke, and if you know me, you'd know it was a joke, because if you know me, the person that I am, you'd know that the comment that I made was a joke. And this person just got really upset about it and full on went off at the comment that I made. And I'm just sort of thinking, why am I having to explain myself to you? Why am I friends with you on Facebook if you don't know me well enough to see that a comment that I made like this is clearly meant to be a joke? I mean, as I say, people who know me will know it's a joke because they know that's just not the way I think. And it was at that point I sort of then started thinking, I am going to be a lot more selective about the people that I become friends with on Facebook, because I this is just sort of my personality and it's the way I am. And I do like to make jokes. I don't make particular, it wasn't like an offensive joke. It wasn't like, a really like a racist or sexist joke or something like that. It was, I can't even remember the specifics of it. But it was something along the lines of people doing something really stupid. And I said something like, I think the simple solution, I think it was something along the lines of the simple solution is to deny these people any sort of medical attention afterwards. And again, this is just, it's meant as a joke. But yeah, this person took real exception to the comment.
Oh yeah.
So that to me is a bit of a problem that, if you end up having these people coming, sort of that are joining in and they're not on the same wavelength as you, I mean, should you really be friends with them on Facebook?
Well, that's kind of one of the bad byproducts of social media is that before social media, before the online experience at all, anything that you said that was exposed to other people was either in audio format or video or face-to-face. And you suffered, whatever consequences came with that. So if you went and said something stupid, people were going to call you out for it to your face, or at least, be aware that this is Joe Blow, and he said this really stupid thing. And so everybody's like, okay, well, ignore Joe. But now you have a certain level of anonymity. Even if you use your own Facebook, you can decide, this person is, coming down on me for saying something irretrievably stupid, even though in your mind you didn't say something stupid. So you can just block them. Yeah. And that's, that's what a lot of people do. And so it's eroded the ability for people to debate. It's eroded the ability for people to have a conversation and to express their own opinions.
Warrior. Yeah. I mean, people are saying stuff online that they would never tell you to your face because they know that they would lose part of their face if they did. And now everybody can say everything online. And it's kind of stupid.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a very specific way of using Facebook. So when I use Facebook, I'm using it mainly, and I'll touch on this in a minute, but I mainly use it for enthusiast groups. And if anyone that I see posts something that I think is offensive or I don't particularly, I'm not going to sit there and argue with them. I just either unfriend them or I, hide their stuff, so I'm not seeing it. I'm not going to sit there getting upset about it. That's not what Facebook is for me. I'm not looking at Facebook as a way for me to go in and right wrongs, make political statements, air my grievances or whatever. That's not what Facebook is for me. Facebook for me is a tool for connecting with, and in my instances, people with like-minded sort of hobbies and stuff like that. So
that's how it started out. That's how it all started out.
He's talking about beige people.
Well, I am a member of quite a few different enthusiast groups on Facebook. So there will be ones about cathode ray tubes, one's about 3D printing, one's about vintage computing, about selling or swapping vintage computing equipment, some car groups as well, and I join all these groups with all these sort of, as I say, like-minded individuals. Most of these groups are moderated, so they're safe spaces in terms of that you're not allowed to. There's no bullying, there's no politics. We are there to talk about this product. You want to tell us about the cool CRT that you picked up on the roadside the other day that still works? That's great. That's what you can do in that. If you want to complain about, the race of the person in the car that just cut you off in traffic, no, that's not it. So, I sort of feel like, in the instance of the way I use Facebook, I actually consider it to be a very good thing. If we're talking about has technology made my life better, I look at this and I think this is fantastic. I when I was younger and interested in certain things, being in Australia without the internet, you wanted something. You were very, very isolated. I was very interested in movie special effects when I was younger, and I used to do my own little movies and stuff like that. And trying to get hold of anything was almost impossible. I mean, it was too expensive or too hard to find. It was all stuff that you had to get from America, and ordering stuff from America was just a huge thing back then. And nowadays, you're looking for something rare or unusual, and you could just jump onto these enthusiast groups and go, "Hey, I'm looking out for one of these. Has anyone seen one?" And bam, you can be either, so-and-so's got a couple, you can probably buy one from him, or so-and-so's making reproduction ones of these. They go just as good as the original, that sort of stuff. And that, to me, it's a wonderful thing. It's a really positive thing to get that sort of connection, bring all of these like-minded people together.
Absolutely. And that's how I shifted a couple years ago. My feed, or your home screen, or what do you call it? Your feed is now just the groups I'm in. I don't see updates of any of my friends, not even my own wife, are on my feed. Just the groups I'm in. If I want to learn about what day Dana had, I have to go to his profile and read his feed. It's not going to show up in my feed. Likewise with
Facebook did just. Let me look here real quick. They did institute a new thing. Yeah, it's at the bottom, right next to the home icon. There's one that says friends. And so you tap that and you see nothing but updates from people on your friends list. And that's new. That's I was like, oh, this is really cool. And they just did that in the last week or two.
Well, that's a great idea, because some days that's maybe what you're in the mood for,
Yeah. But when I started using it just for the groups that I'm in and the sharing of knowledge, great. Apart from that, I see it as, and it's not just Facebook, it's all the platforms. I see it as a shark pond that I am navigating very carefully as to not get bitten by something horrible.
Yeah.
If we want to look at some of the other positives, and these are things I sort of put down in the notes there. First of all, if you look at people either maybe with, sort of some neurodivergence, so people maybe, with anxiety, or people with, sort of some sort of issue that might stop them from being able to socialize in a face-to-face type situation, or they may be deliberately trying to avoid face-to-face social contact. Now, once upon a time, those sorts of people would just ultimately be isolated. Social media can often
chat rooms.
Yes, that's right. In the early days of the sort of bulletin boards and stuff like that, and I feel like it's like social media gives those people an outlet, gives them a lot of social contact, gives them the ability to chat to people in a safe space, in a safe way. And the same can be said about people that maybe have disabilities, either physical disabilities that stop them from leaving the house, or think about, one of the things that I always think of is like grandma at home being able to look at all her grandkids, all the stuff that's happening with her grandkids, and stay in contact with them. Maybe talk about someone where, sort of a physical issue stops them from being able to, get out and about and have the sort of social contact they would. They can then jump on and see all of the family photos and keep up to date with all the things that are going on. And this is where I see social media being a really, really positive thing, a much better thing in life that has improved the lives of a lot of people.
And like I said, that's how a lot of them started out, was, connecting with friends, like-minded people, that sort of thing. The unfortunate thing about social media today is that it's all run by algorithms that are trying to make you interact, that are trying to make you react. Hey, here's this cat video that you like, and you click like on it, and then you happen to look at the person who hosted it, and has nothing to do with, cat rescues or it's just some guy who's looking for clicks. And so now Facebook thinks, oh, you like this guy, we're going to show you more of his videos, even though they may not have anything to do with the subject matter you just liked. And then you look at the comment section, and you've got a bunch of freaking mouth breathers talking about, why did you let the dog play with the cat? He could have heard it. It's like, are you stupid? And of course, that's what you want to say. Are you stupid, or are you just ignorant? It's just, but that's what it's designed for now, is the algorithms whether it's Instagram, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Facebook, or any of that stuff. They're all designed to show you things to try and make you interact.
And keep scrolling.
Right. Especially if they have a sense of what your politics are, what your preferences are, what your favorite, TV shows are. They show you stuff the opposite so that you react to it, so that and you just have to train your mind to say, okay, I'm not going to respond to this. I'm just going to scroll right past it. And there's so many people that cannot do that. Yeah, because it's not natural to do that. You feel like, oh, I have the ability to respond. I'm going to respond. Well, that's what they're hoping for.
Well, I remember hearing from some social specialist, something or other. I can't remember, but he was saying that the thing is, Facebook is all about connecting, right? Mm-hmm. But the one thing the software will never do is sort of help you physically connect with someone. It's never going to pop up and say, hey, so-and-so friend is, in the same shopping center as you. Would you like to, do you want to approach them to catch up for a coffee or something like that? Because the last thing they want you to do is leave the interface. They want to, they want to make it so that you keep scrolling and every little new thing that comes up is something that's going to interest you so that you then keep scrolling. Yeah. The impact of this on our attention spans has just been horrendous. I mean, and you see it when you go out or somewhere. Let's just say, I don't know, you see a couple at a restaurant, right? Now
they're both like this.
Sometimes you see them both like that, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, no, they're not both like that. You got a couple at a restaurant, they're having a meal together, they're chatting, and everything's going great. Partway through the meal, she gets up, she says, I got to go powder my nose. She heads off to the ladies' room. Second he's on his own, out comes the phone. Mm-hmm. And she starts scrolling, and away you're checking his social media, looking at whatever, looking like that. And then she comes back and the phone goes away again. Now that's actually a good case scenario. Some of them are just on the phone.
Yeah, but it's like that time at the restaurant is the distraction for those people. They can't wait to go back to just scrolling on their phone.
Right. And I look at the way that this happens, and whether it be someone. I mean, people may not remember this, but doctors' waiting rooms used to have magazines in them, but now it's like they don't even bother because people are just sitting there playing with their phone the whole time. And I find sort of that sort of constant desire for distraction rather than just thought time is doing terrible things to people's attention span on the whole. People just forgetting what they were doing. Like, I was doing this and I can't remember, now I'm doing this, and just getting led off on, sort of distractive paths, paths of distraction all the time. And, it's not a good thing, for people.
Well, there's clinical studies being done now all the time that are proving that not only that they study the actual light that comes from your phone, the effect that it has on your brain and it keeps you awake, but the actual act of scrolling and interacting and watching these videos over and over and over and reading other posts and things, you get micro doses of endorphins in your brain, and that helps keep you awake. That keeps you, and then so your body gets used to those constant little endorphin hits, and so then you keep going back to it, and it's literally an addiction. It's not like narcotics or anything. That was the same principle where your body chemistry is adapting to these constant little micro doses of endorphins when you see something you like or something you don't like that gets your adrenaline going. And they say that it's fairly unhealthy, and that's why you see a lot of the like Apple has the parental controls or the screen time, whatever it's called now.
Yep.
And it's an attempt to curb that.
Doesn't work. By the way,
there is another thing, a very important part of this, and again, this is we've talked about definite positives, but then of course there are the negatives, and of course the other real negative is the bullying. As someone who grew up, exposed to some bullying and responsible for some as well, but we won't talk about that. The important thing about bullying when I went to school is it stopped when school stopped. It's, there's for some of those kids, they were having a terrible time at school, coming in and ultimately facing bullying for most of the time they were there. But it started when they arrived at the school and it stopped when they left the school. Now we've got a situation where people are being bullied literally 24/7. If these people want to have some social interactions outside of school, and they're going to be doing it on social media in some form, and then the bullying is going to keep coming. The bullying will come at them while they're lying in bed at night about to go to sleep. Yeah. And that is something that I feel is, and you can't just take this stuff away from them. It's, it's a bit like, if you're sending your kids off to school, I don't know, and all the other kids have got sandwiches and you send your kid off to school with, I don't know, an apple or something like that. And it's like, they're all getting nice stuff and I've just got an apple, and it's this kind of, you have this thing where all the other kids are on these social media platforms. So these kids want to be on them. They have this desire to be on them because that's what everyone else is doing. And so it's difficult to then just say, well, if there's bullying on Facebook or if there's bullying on whatever platform, just don't use it. You just can't say that to these kids. You can't say it to a kid because it's such an important part of their lives. And so they're drawn to these things that are then have this incredibly negative impact on them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that goes back or ties in with what I said earlier about the keyboard warriors. I was bullied in school too. I was around age 7 or 8. My neighbor found out about it and said, "Hey, tomorrow night, come to the local gym this time." It turns out he was a boxing coach, and I took up boxing. The bullying stopped fairly shortly after, because there were consequences now to bullying.
Yes.
And that worked. And online, there are no real consequences. First of all, none of these platforms are enforcing the age limit to sign up. Any 7-year-olds have Facebook, and they know, but they still let it happen. And you can be fairly anonymous if you want to be. And even if you're not anonymous, there's no real consequences to bullying.
Yeah, that's right. And how do you stop it? I mean, let's face it. Even if they were to bring in a rule, even if there's a rule to say, I don't know, no one's allowed on Facebook until you're 16 or over. How the hell do you police that? I mean, how can you ever police that? So, you can have all of the best intentions, but at the end of the day, if the kids are wanting to be on it, they'll find a way.
I think a lot of it ties into parents wanting to be on it too, and then not monitoring what their kids are doing or what's being said about them or what they have access to. And I think that's a huge problem, is parents not being good parents these days. And it's like, for whatever reason, whether they weren't taught how to be good parents or whether they are distracted by their phones or their devices or their work or whatever else.
Pick up the same thing happening to them as well. It's very difficult for me because I don't have kids. It's very easy for me to talk about, parents should be doing a better job at this and that. And so for example, one of the things that drives me bananas is how hard it is to get little batteries out of things now. They all have to have compartments that screw closed. You have a screw to do. You can't just go, I'm going to whip that open and change the battery. It's like, no, I need a freaking screwdriver to do it.
Yeah. I probably still have a Duracell in my system somewhere. I'm fine.
You then when you go to get the replacement battery, you go get the packet and you can't get it out because it's now sealed into a little plastic cocoon.
Oh, those things are like molecularly bonded. You have to get a pair of scissors and then risk damaging the product inside.
For me, as an adult that doesn't have kids, it's very easy for me to say, why am I being penalized because of bad parenting? But at the same time, I also have to accept that when I was growing up, there were far less of those sorts of batteries out there. We had things that ran on, AA was the smallest, I know AAAs existed, but, not much ran on.
But to be fair, you were in the backyard playing with rusty nails and it was fine.
Yeah. And matches and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. But nearly burned the house down once, but that was okay. It worked out fine in the end. But
still in the forest.
Yes, that's true. But you try and swallow a AA battery, you're not going to, or even, young people probably don't even remember these D-cell batteries.
Oh yeah, I got a bunch of
them.
those.
Yeah.
Yes, but
I have some old lanterns that still run on D-cell batteries. Yeah.
Coleman.
You got so many things these days that run on these little, sort of whatever they call them, coin cell batteries and stuff like that.
Oh,
They
yeah.
are able to be swallowed. And just in case you're not aware of just how much damage they can do, all you have to do is get one of those, sit it in some water and see what happens. In a very, very short span of time, they get really toxic. So I totally accept the danger. What I get frustrated by is the fact that everyone gets penalised because of the actions of a small few. Most kids aren't swallowing those batteries. In most homes, probably those batteries are being kept out of reach, and so they're not at risk of getting swallowed. But because there are some people that aren't being careful enough, they're having to put in these actions that affect anyone. It's the word nanny state comes to mind, But as I say, I have to accept that because I am not a parent, it's very easy for me to comment on this stuff, but I have never been through that situation. I've never been in a situation where, a kid's ended up swallowing something that shouldn't have and, or whatever the case may be. But that is definitely something that it is very easy to just blame the parents, but I've got no right to because I'm not a parent.
No, you are a child, though.
I am a child. Yeah. I'm a great big child.
Yes. Speaking as a parent, there's no way to catch it. I mean, I totally get it. It's annoying because I need to buy those batteries for my kids' toys all the time. And I'm ranting, raving, dropping F-bombs, throwing stuff, trying to get the packaging open. So I get it, but as much as you try to teach them, no, it's not okay to take a power plug by the metal prongs and put it. You're not going to catch everything. So I get it. I hate it too, but I get it. Yeah. Like when they started putting labels on the microwave, don't put your kid in the microwave. Somewhere.
Somewhere did that.
Yeah.
Or someone's kid said, hey, I'll stick my head in there and hit start, see what happens. But there's something to be said for, to a degree, kids having to learn things on their own. You can warn them, hey, don't touch that. That's hot. But sometimes they have to touch it before they learn. Now, in my experience, just real quick, Jay talked about the electric plugs and things. I was fascinated with the outlets. I was like, how do those work? And, mom and dad would say, you need to plug this into the outlet and it gives it power. And that's how it works is there's electricity. So don't stick your finger in there. Don't put anything in there. And I'm just like, because I'm like 6 years old, I don't understand. I'm like, you put the plug in there and it doesn't zap you. So, and I remember one day in the den, I sat down on the floor and I had a fork and I just kind of tapped on it and it sent a jolt up my arm. I couldn't feel my fingers for 10 minutes. And I was screaming and crying and Dad comes in and he says, well, you won't do that again, will you? And wow, he was right. I never did it again. So.
Yeah, but power outlets did not get banned or special.
No, but now they have those little plastic things you can stick in there so that kids can't walk up and stick a fork in it. But
to be fair, I have used those.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is that you can actually have an unpleasant experience with mains power, but you can also have a fatal experience with mains power.
You can,
and sort of the unpleasant experience is you learn from it. The fatal one, you don't learn anything. So, I can definitely understand, why things like those little outlet plugs exist. I can definitely understand that. Yeah. But bringing it back onto the social media side, and I guess to some extent this includes all of the internet as well. Using your example of, people just have to learn themselves,
certain things.
Yeah, certain things. When you think about what the sort of stuff people can access via the internet this day in terms of, sort of the nature of what, we're talking about, really horrible stuff or pornography or something like that, really bad sorts of things that once you see, you can never unsee. That stuff is just a click away. Yeah. And And that was never the case, you know. I mean, when I was growing up, if I wanted to see some dirty pictures, you really had to work for it. But
Not unless you knew where your brother's stash was. That made it
didn't have
easier.
a brother. Yeah, so whereas these days it is always there. So it really does become parents' responsibility, you know, to protect their kids from that stuff, because it is so easy. Well, that's really where I
am very, very well versed in the risks that online life brings, but like my parents were not. They said, "Here's a dial-up modem, enjoy." And you know, the kind of websites you had in the early 2000s was wow. It was everything. It was the Wild West of the internet. My parents had no idea. They didn't prepare me for it. I've seen the Wild West and what it has become since then. So, dude, my firewall is wow. I block everything from porn, gambling, you name it, I block it. But it still slips through, and usually in ways that you don't expect it. Like every parent these days, at some point, you say, I can't deal with you right now. I have a meeting or whatever. Here's an iPad. Watch YouTube. And then you walk by one day and you hear the kind of ads they play on that network and other networks during kids' content. You're like, you're never accessing YouTube again, my friend. And you can't block that stuff. But when it comes to privacy, security, I'm not going to prepare him for stuff that's going to be a thing 10 years from now. There's no way I can. So it's tricky.
Yeah, it is. And also, you know, when I think about things like parents having to take devices away from their kids, you know, like when they go to bed or something like that. And of course, the backlash they then have to deal with, you know, the kids going, you know, I mean, I know of this is a true story where a family, and they had a policy with the kids at the end of the night before they go to bed, had to all put their devices into a bowl. And one of the kids who just didn't particularly like that rule, he decided one night that he would just throw his phone case in the bowl and not his phone. And he got caught out ultimately. But you know, you've put in these rules about that, and you know, clearly the kids are not happy about it. So you know, you're going to have this daily struggle with trying to keep kids off social media, because it's their social contact that they with the younger minds. They're not very good at sort of at denying themselves that sort of stuff.
When it comes to and I don't know if this, has technology improved our life? It fits. Many parents, to stick with the topic of kids for a second, use iPads, iPhones, or any kind of tablet or phone as babysitters. And
always.
I cannot even begin to tell you how dangerous that is. First of all, it literally, well, not literally, it rots their brain. It turns them into brats. And something we instituted here at home is like 7 p.m. is digital cutoff. You're going to play with your Legos, do whatever you need to do to calm your brain down before you go to bed. You get X amount of hours of digital time a day. Homework these days is mostly on certain websites and guided websites that he has to take quizzes and all that stuff. So we don't count that. But when it comes to iPad, after an hour, it locks down. When it comes to watching TV, you only watch the content that I put on my server. And I pay for one or two services that are specifically kids oriented, that actively go against, like what I told you, the kind of ads and stuff they run on other platforms. They go against that. So I know it's safe. I vetted it. But no, total digital time a day, maybe 2 hours tops. If you're bored, sit on the couch and sulk about it. Which he will do for 10, 15 minutes. Then he gets bored of sulking, and he will go play with his Legos, or he will go knock on the neighbor's house. Hey, can buddy,
this is going to get harder and harder for you the older he gets.
Does he have an iPad I can borrow?
One of the things that I see regularly, my wife and I go out to dinner with my mother on a weekly basis. And so we've got a few little favorite restaurants that we go to. We sort of take it in turns, you know, we go to this one and then we go to that one. And what I very regularly see will be a family at the dinner table with little kids, and the little kids throughout the whole thing are on the iPads.
Yeah.
They're on the iPads so that the parents can have a time out to have a meal while they're out to dinner. And I get it. I mean, I'm not saying I would do any differently, because at the end of the day, they're wanting to go out, they're wanting to have some of adult time, have a bit of a chat, bring the kids along, and you're all having a family meal, but ultimately the kids are being entertained by the iPad.
Yeah.
Now, that in itself, well, I totally accept. I see that there are problems associated with that. One of the things that I really do have an issue with is the ones that play games with the volume up high.
Yes.
Because I feel that actually sets a very poor precedent to the concept of,
considering other people around
considering other people. When we use the example of, like, when I grew up, when you would go to a movie theater, everyone was silent during the film. People might clap when good things happen, or they're laughing when the funny things happen. But these days you can go into a cinema and people will just sit there and talk through the whole movie, or they will have their phones out, and I sort of feel like these, and it's the same with people that listen to stuff on their phones on public transport. They'll be sitting there watching a movie on their phone with the volume cranked up, no headphones. And it is just such an inconsiderate thing to do, with all this, your people that are around you, that you think you are so important that, that you're happy to just remove everyone else's kind of, quiet time. I find it's disgraceful. And I sort of feel like this is where it's going. I mean, we have to remember that, I grew up at a time where, you didn't have mobile phones, and then eventually, we then had mobile phones, and then we had smartphones, we had the internet in our pocket. We've got people that have grown up with that their entire life. And when did the iPhone come out?
2006.
2006. That's
6 or 7.
So, yeah. Okay. So that is
it was
now.
iPod touches before that. It started a little before.
Yeah.
And so we're getting close to 20 years that they've been around. So you can have someone who is, 18 years old, who has had their entire life with iPhones. Yeah. And I find that a mind-boggling concept. And as I say, it is also a little bit worrying about these people that have just only ever known having the internet in their pocket. That's the only life they've ever known. I just find that completely.
This word has come up several times throughout most of the stuff we covered. Cell phones, and there are lots of pros, lots of cons, but I'm just going to throw one of them out there that has been pissing me off since cell phones became a thing, especially cell phones with good cameras. I used to go to concerts a lot, and do you ever see video footage of a concert and all you see is a sea of screens? Nobody is watching the concert. Yeah. They're all looking like, am I getting the best shot?
Right. Yeah. And you know what they're going to do with that video? They're going to post it on social media to show everyone, look here, look at me, look at where I was.
Look, I was there.
Yeah, that's right.
But did you actually experience it, or did you just focus all your attention on filming it?
Look, I mean, one thing I will say is that this is something that goes back before phones. I mean, for me, I've always been an avid photographer, and even when I used to have an SLR, even a digital SLR, an SLR with film in it, I would sometimes find myself going to places, holidays, wherever it might be, events, whatever, where I would be, my memory of that day would be looking through a viewfinder. And that's been around, as I say, since before phones have been around, but it's just way more prevalent now, that, that reminder to be in the moment rather than just trying to capture stuff.
I learned that the hard way. Yeah. That kind of, it kind of blends in with digital cameras and that kind of stuff. But this was, I think it was 2005, early 2000s. I had a little Canon Cyber Shot or whatever, one of my first digital cameras. Yeah. And it took fast photos and it was good, and it was New Year's Eve, and I was taking all these awesome shots of fireworks, and I completely missed New Year's Eve because and the girl I was with at the time was pissed, like, oh, he was doing and I didn't realize it until it was done, and it was too late. But I was so focused on watching everything through my screen to get the best shot and the best video that I completely missed the moment. And I'm kind of lucky that it happened early on in my life, because if I would have had that same mistake when my kid was born or birthday parties of my kid, I'd be pissed. So there's lots of events that I do not have photo or footage of because I purposely put my phone. I don't have a digital camera anymore. It's all phone now. I put it away. So no, I'm sorry.
I get the temptation to do that because you're like, this is really cool. I'm enjoying this. I want to remember this, and I want to be able to look back at this video and say, hey, I was there, and I can hear every note of every song or whatever. So there is that temptation, and I'm guilty of doing it myself more than one occasion. But then you have to stop and go, is it more important that I make sure that the frame is right, that the, sound isn't too loud, that the color's right, or whatever, the focus, where I want to focus the camera on, and all that stuff gets in the way of the experience itself. And so when you look back on that event, instead of remembering instead of having the memory of the experience, you have the memory of filming the experience.
Yeah.
And it's not the same.
It's not. And I have pictures of events where I have all my friends having a party or whatever, and there are no pictures of me at that party because I was the only idiot that was taking pictures. Everybody else was just enjoying it.
I'm the same. Yeah.
Like, were you there? Yeah, I took the damn shots. But
Yeah, I mean, just looking back at cell phones, incidentally, in Australia, we call them a mobile phone. But I just want to talk about something to do with cell phones, just going back a little bit. If we look at them in terms of their original intention, and that is being a telephone, and then you go right back to landline type telephones, and you think about the introduction of them when they were a novelty. So the very early days where there weren't very many telephones out there, and not every house had them, but and then when the phone would ring, it was a kind of a drop everything thing. The phone is ringing. Phone calls were a fairly important thing, and then you'd pick up the phone, you'd say hello. Incidentally, hello is a term that was used specifically for phones. The fact that we now use them for greeting people in person is just something that has happened since the invention of the telephone. But you were meant to pick up the phone and say hello. That was determined to be the correct greeting for when you picked up a phone. And whatever you were doing when that phone was ringing, you would stop and you would answer the phone. Now, of course, now fast forward a little bit, you've now got phones everywhere. You've got phones. I won't even go to cell phones yet. We're still talking about landlines. There is still that whole thing of when the phone rings, you drop everything and you answer it, because if you don't, you'll miss out on finding out whatever there is to know. Now, if it's important information, that's all perfectly understandable. But now we go to a situation where phones are everywhere. Is the phone still afforded that level of attention? And I'll give you this sort of example. You're standing talking to someone, okay? Let's imagine there are three people. There are two people chatting to each other. And one person walks up to the other person while in mid-conversation and just starts tapping him on the shoulder and saying, hey, 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 hey. Just interrupting him in the middle of the conversation. Hey, hey. Hey, 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 hey. It's rude. It's awful. It's terrible. You don't do that. That is effectively what a telephone is these days. You can be in the middle of a conversation with someone, your phone can start ringing, and there's an expectation that you're going to stop that conversation and pick up the phone and answer it. Yeah. And I absolutely despise that.
Do.
I have got to a stage in my life. It's funny because when I was growing up, when the phone rang, I was like, "Oh, excited! Well, who's on the other end? Who's calling?" Now I've got to the point that when my phone rings, I just want to throw it against a wall. I hate receiving phone calls. I absolutely hate it. I mean, not to mention
note to self: call Bruce tomorrow.
I think the phone app is actually the least used app on my phone. I don't use it. Yeah. But I will say, what you just said, if I'm talking to someone or I'm hanging out and we're in a one-on-one conversation or talking as a group, or say, hey, want to go shoot some pool tonight, and some dude ends up on his phone the entire night, I will not only say you're being a douche, But next time it happens, I'll just walk away, because to me that's disrespectful. You want to hang out, hang out. If your phone is more important than me, not saying that I'm important, but we agreed to go hang out, so hang out. And it's the same if I have an important call, like, hey, my wife is in the hospital, I'm expecting an important call, so if we get interrupted, sorry, I will let you know in advance. Like, I just applied for a job, I'm expecting a message, so I'll be checking my phone once in a while. I don't think it's okay to just zone out and start browsing your phone at all.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. And I know a few people that do that, and they're people that I don't necessarily like spending time with, and basically don't spend time with them anymore. But it is sort of the height of rudeness. I mean, again, one of these things. The whole purpose of this discussion. There's going to be a part 2 of this one as well, isn't it? This will be like our fourth one. We still haven't done a single part 2 yet.
It's likely. I mean, we have. I mean, in all of these cases, we have so many personal experience to draw from. I mean, we're talking cell phones. We haven't even gotten to the positives of cell phones yet.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was actually going to say I do. The whole purpose of this is, has technology made my life better? And I have to say, I don't think anyone can deny there are lots of advantages of having a cell phone. If we look at it just purely from the phone side of it, not the internet side of it, but purely from the phone side of it, your car's broken down on the side of the road, stranded somewhere, you're able to call for help. If you're meeting someone somewhere, you're going out to dinner and you get delayed, you miss your train or something, you're going to be half an hour late, ring that person up and say, I'm going to be half an hour late, sorry, because I just missed my train, or something has happened, being able to coordinate meeting in places, that sort of stuff. I mean, when I think about it, when we were growing up, we would all meet at a certain place at a certain time. And once you were on your way, that's it. You then just had to make sure you were there at that time. Otherwise, you were going to miss out.
If you were late, you ended up scouring the entire neighborhood for your friends.
I mean, they might wait for 5 or 10 minutes for you. But at the end of the day, at a certain point, they're going to go, "Oh, he's not coming," and off they go.
But what about take away the phone capability, calling each other? What about drop me off in the middle of Tokyo? I can point my cell phone at a street sign. It'll translate for me what it says right there. And all the additional things a cell phone can do now is just amazing. It's made me a smarter parent. My kid will ask me how this works. They're like, oh, yeah, I'll tell you in a second. This is exactly how it works.
There's a high pressure system forming over the east there.
Yeah, it's a cumulus cloud, clearly.
It's kind of funny to think about, and I'm just now, I've thought about this briefly in the past, but now I'm really starting to recall. I was born in the mid-'70s. So I remember when, dinner time was over, kids, we'd be out in the yard playing, and, mom would be in the house, or mom and dad would both be outside or whatever. And we'd hear the phone ring, because the house is all open, you go in the open windows, open doors, you hear the phone ring and everybody's like, I'm not going to get it. Are you going to get it? No, they'll call back, and kids weren't interested in it. And mom and dad didn't want to be bothered by it. And then as a kid growing up, you reach a certain age where all of you're talking to, and this is the 80s, so you're talking to your friends from school on the phone all the time. It was just a ritual of life that I was on the phone after school every day for, however long. And so if the phone rang, you would run to that phone and pick it up because you didn't know who it was. Could be for you, could be for your parents, could be, we didn't get a lot of junk calls back then either. There wasn't a thing.
No, it wasn't a thing.
And so chances are it's somebody that you needed to talk to or needed to talk to someone in your family. And then you get into the age of the cell phone where you're like, well, you can decide whether you want to answer it or not because you can, in most cases, see who it is. And now with me, it's to the point where if I don't know your number, if your number is not in my contacts, the phone will not answer. And if you don't leave a voicemail, you're not going to get heard back from me. So It's kind of like gone back. It's kind of gone full circle a little bit.
How many people were in your house, Dana?
4.
So it was for me. It was me, my brother, my dad, and before they got divorced, my mom. But that doesn't matter. We didn't have answering machines. What I want to talk about is answering machines.
Yeah.
So you come home from school, and your brother is there with a smirk on his face, like, "Who's Monica?" It's like, why? And he would have all this blackmail material that was recorded on an answering machine, and I would do the same to him, and my dad would do it to both of us. Answering machines are the devil, man. I got screwed over by those things so many times. Answering machines did not make my life better.
I'm going to just go back to the sort of information, well, the other features of the iPhone, and I just want to tell a little story here. So when we were growing up, we had a little book. It was like Leonard Maltin's movie guide or something like that. And each year there would be a new one that would come out with all the new movies on it, and that's how you get that. And one of the things that you could do with this guide is, I think it was at the back or somewhere, you could kind of look up the name of an actor and it would tell you every movie they had been in. And that was a huge thing. I mean, I was pretty good at recognizing people from other movies. You know, where's that what movie is that person from? Oh, they were in so-and-so. You know. But when you'd see somebody go, I know that face, but I can't remember what movie they're in. And then you'd sit to the end and you'd get the credits and go, oh, okay, it's that person. Then we'd grab the movie guide and you'd look that up and you go, oh, it's like, and sometimes, you know, it might be the guide you got's too old, they're not in it, or maybe the actor isn't well enough to be in the top billing, so they weren't in it. But we had this guide for finding out, you know, what, and this was something that I was always obsessed with, you know, what this actor, he's been in something else, what is it? I was always obsessed with that. And then you end up with the Internet Movie Database in your phone. And you can be sitting there having a conversation with someone in a restaurant, and they'll be going, oh, God, what's the name of that guy from that movie? You know, it's like, you know, out come the phones from 2 seconds later, you know, that's it. Yeah, that's the name. That's the one. And of course, in the olden days, it was, what's the name of the guy from that movie? And we'd be sitting there going, oh, it's just on the tip of my tongue, and you're sitting there.
It could very easily ruin your night. You would just sit there.
And then you get it home.
It bugs you. It bugs you till you remember.
Yeah, it'd be like 2 o'clock in the morning, lying in bed, going, "Oh, this is who it was." And I look at that, and I sort of see that. I do actually see that as an up and a down. So that's getting a of these. And the reason why I say that is because having that sort of recall, I think, is good exercise for the brain.
Oh, yeah.
You know, absorbing information, and then when someone asks you a question and then you're having to think about it and recall, I think that's really good for the brain. Yeah. And so when you're in this situation now, you don't need to spend any time thinking about it at all. Out just comes the phone. You just put in the, you know, it's like, he was in so-and-so with so-and-so, so I'm going to look that movie up. And then, you know, and then you can just sort of, you know, trace your way to who the actor is.
I still recall most of the phone numbers before 2006. Whatever phone numbers I had memorized at the time I got my first phone, I still know today.
Yeah.
Everything since? Don't ask me.
Yeah. I remember my best friend's phone number from middle school and high school. I remember with the house that he lived in. I remember that number. I could read it off to you right now. I cannot tell you what my mother's cell phone number is.
I
can't tell you what my sister's cell phone number is. I know like the last 4 digits, but I cannot remember. You don't have to anymore. No, and so it was like you were talking about.
If I wanted to use a payphone, I better know the damn number.
Or you better hope there's a phone book attached to it, and somebody hasn't ripped it off.
I'm reminded of that scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where you know, sort of he had his notebook. You know, what's his name? Sean Connery had his notebook, and you know, Harrison Ford was just saying, "Why can't you remember it?" And he's like, "I wrote it in my notebook so I wouldn't have to remember it."
Right.
So I mean, there's no need to memorize any of that stuff anymore. You just don't need to. I mean, someone asks you that stuff. I mean, it's like, grab the phone. It's in here. I'll tell you in a second.
I'm terrible at memorizing things now because we don't get that constant brain exercise. You know, whether you're remembering movie actors or movie quotes or phone numbers or with me, it was, being a vintage Mac enthusiast. I could tell you what the bus speed of an LC2 is, but I can't remember what the stock configuration of my brand new Mac Studio here it was when it was sold new. It's just a lot of that stuff has gone by the wayside. It's gone away.
Yeah.
But the stuff that I really had to read up on, physically read and study and retain is all still there. But now with anything new, I have to go and look it up on the phone or on the web and so
it's definitely it's definitely a good and a bad when it comes to the phone. I mean, it brings an incredible level of convenience. I mean, I can't remember which one of you mentioned like GPS. I mean, GPS for me is one of the best inventions out there. One thing I will say about a cell phone, it's silly actually calling them a cell phone, because when I think of a cell phone, I think of like an old Nokia. At the end of the day, I think what I'm talking about is like an iPhone. I'm not even going to use the word smartphone, because when I think of smartphones, I think of those stupid BlackBerry things.
Blackberries. Yeah.
I think it's an iPhone. Okay, I get that they're not
they're all
smartphones
now.
And even the Android phones are an iPhone. Okay, so the full screen, no buttons on the front, that sort of thing, that is an iPhone. All of the other ones have copied iPhones, so they're all iPhones. So I'm just going to call them an iPhone, right? So
I don't think you can. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to push back on this. You can't.
The Android people are going to get all pissy about it. I know that.
Well, not only that, but they're using the wrong phone, so that's on them. But and I'm not too familiar with the underlying technology, but aren't you connecting to a cell, or what is it called? You are the cell connecting... I don't know. It's a cell.
The cell is the tower, isn't it? The tower network. Is the cell. Yeah. So
it is a cell phone.
Yes. Okay. Yes, but I'm trying to create a distinction between like the old Nokia brick phones.
Yeah, I think of the giant bricks that you had to make.
Yeah, that's right. So, but anyhow, I'll call it an iPhone, whatever. But anyhow, but one of the things that an iPhone and to some extent a tablet have brought, which is something that I have been. For me, I consider this is the pinnacle of technology. I mean, whatever people were aspiring for in technology, once they've reached this point, you just don't need to keep reaching anymore. You stop, you've done it, you've completed it. And that is being able to watch television or movies while sitting on the loo. So that for me, I used to have little portable televisions when I was younger. I loved little portable TVs. I've always been a big fan of that from the gadget perspective. Don't forget to watch our show on gadgets. And then when you have a phone or a tablet where you can now actually sit there and watch an HD movie while sitting on the loo. I mean, that is just, to me, that is the peak of human technology. We can go no further.
I agree. You're done taking a crap when your feet go numb. That's typically when you're done these days.
That's right.
You can do your banking. You can pay your bills. You can manage your stocks. You can,
I just sent an invoice to a client while I'm in the bathroom. How else? I make money sitting here. Yeah.
We used to have these things. You guys may or may not be old enough for these. Dana probably, but I'm not sure. Anyhow, Nintendo Game & Watch. And they were a little device about that size, and they were a handheld game. And they called them Game & Watch because it was a game, but it was also a clock, and it had a little stand that could come out the back, and it had the time on it, and you could set an alarm so you could use it as a watch, even though like more of a clock, and it had a game on it as well. And there were a few. There was like Oil Panic, there was Donkey Kong, there was I think there was one just called Water, and there are all these different ones that are out there, and they were just like little crystal screen, and things would be falling down. You'd have to catch them. Very low tech. I mean, high tech for the time, but when you look at it today, it's real basic stuff. And that was something that, you could take into the bathroom with you and really, spend a lot of time there, as I say, until your feet go numb, playing these games, trying to get higher scores and stuff like that. But, it's just since then, it's just been progress since that point. Yeah, these things getting better and better until, until what we have today.
I cannot disagree with you. You're speaking truth here.
Yes. So I think, probably at this stage, I think I'm probably going to wrap things up right now because, as I say, we've peaked at watching movies on the toilet. I don't know if we can go anywhere from there. We may come back and revisit this topic in a later episode because there is still a lot to talk about. And ultimately, I think the takeaway with this is that although so many of these things do bring us great benefits, I think virtually everything we've talked about today, they have definite pluses to them. But a lot of these things bring in a lot of, significant negatives as well, or, pitfalls that you might need to look out for, that sort of thing. But on the whole, what are you guys thinking? Do you think is technology making your life better? I mean, after the discussion we've had today?
I'd say, yeah, if used, and that applies to social media, streaming services, cell phones, or any of the million other things we have yet to talk about. If used responsibly, I think it can be very good.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Thank you both. I didn't even introduce you at the beginning.
No,
everyone. Yeah,
I'm Jay.
This is Dana. This is Dana. This is Jay. That's Jay, and that's Dana. No, that's these are two people, and one of them is Jay, and one of them is Dana. I'd like to thank you both for being on the show tonight. Thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you at the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Go away now.
All right, Bruce, I'll give you a minute to write an intro, since you can.
I'm going to just do it off the top of my head.
No, you can't do that.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. Here, watch me. Hi there, my name's Bruce Rain.
This is Bruce's radio show now.
Is my camera zooming in on me?
Sorry?
Yeah, it was.
What the fuck?
Get your shit together.
I'm trying, bro.
Dana,
Well,
can you see the notes yet?
no.
Well, fuck.
I just see your face of a little triangle. That's weird.
I can't hide from my camera. Minnie, be gone. No. Nope. Stop hitting my microphone. Stop it. Is that why it takes so long before we get a final version? I mean,
Yes.
I kind of expected an hour after we're done recording.
I've got none free ports on this one.
Phone's like, I know you're fucking there. Quit dicking around with me.
Like, take it with me, bro. I know where you are.
Please don't check my browser history.
Now trying to find you.
I tricked. Don't
It's
right,
following your
find a way to
eyes.
turn that shit off.
Hi there, my name is Bruce, and welcome to Startup Disc's full episode. Tech Chat. Forgot the Tech Chat.
Try that. Stop it. Get some help.